Hours of rain delay almost stole this story before it even got the chance to be told. We sat there wondering if Shedeur Sanders was even going to get his shot at all, whether this entire audition in front of Todd Monken was going to get washed out before a single snap happened. It felt genuinely dangerous for a while, sitting through that storm, not knowing if this night would even happen. Then the weather finally broke, and what followed was one of the more complete performances I've watched from this quarterback all camp. I want to set the stage properly here, because context matters enormously for what Sanders actually accomplished. He played that entire first half without almost any of his usual first-team support around him. Denzel Boston was the only real starter on the field with him, and even then, Sanders never actually connected with him for a completion. Everyone else in that huddle was backups, depth pieces, guys fighting for roster spots of their own. And through all of that, what stood out to me more than any individual stat was the way he carried himself. That's not camp confidence. That's the look and the feel of an actual professional quarterback. Someone who's ready to operate an NFL offense, regardless of who's lined up around him. Let's start with that opening drive, because it was genuinely methodical from snap one. Sanders answered every single question this offense threw at him, on the way to a touchdown strike to Luke Floria in the back of the end zone. Watch the patience in this drive. Watch how comfortable he looks, operating behind an offensive line that, and I genuinely never expected to say this about a backup unit, gave him real time in the pocket. With that time, Sanders stayed decisive, threw accurate footballs, and methodically moved this offense down the field. People talk about certain quarterbacks being gamers, guys who elevate specifically when the lights come on. I felt like every question this game presented, Sanders had an answer ready before it was even fully asked. There's a 4th and 2 conversion from this game that I think is the single best rep of his entire preseason. Real live situation, midfield, 5 seconds left on the play clock as he gets to the line, straight drop back, and Buffalo sends real pressure. Up to 5 rushers coming at him at once. Watch what he does. He doesn't drift, he doesn't bail, he stays anchored in that pocket, eyes locked downfield the entire time, makes a small, subtle adjustment with his feet, and delivers an absolute seed to his tight end working across the field. That's not just an NFL-caliber arm making a good throw. That's a starting-level NFL quarterback working through real interior pressure on a critical 4th down, with backups protecting him, and looking more composed doing it than I've seen him look on any tape all camp. Beautiful placement, outstretched hands on the other end, 4th down converted. That's about as complete a rep as you can ask a young quarterback to deliver. I keep coming back to how much situational pressure was actually loaded onto that single play. It's not 1st and 10, with room to check the ball down and live for another play. It's 4th down, the clock bleeding away, real interior pressure collapsing the pocket around him, and a coaching staff watching every single frame of that snap to decide whether this young quarterback belongs at the very top of a depth chart. Plenty of talented passers see their mechanics fall apart in exactly that kind of moment. Footwork, getting rushed, eyes dropping to the rush instead of staying locked on the route. None of that happened here. If a coaching staff is looking for one single rep to define composure under duress, this is the one they should be pulling up on the projector. Then there's the 3rd and 15 conversion. And I want to bring up last season for context here, because the Browns faced an absurd number of long 3rd downs a year ago, thanks to a struggling offensive line and a run game that never got going. Sanders had to manufacture magic out of those situations constantly. Here's exactly that kind of magic showing up again. Straight drop back. The offensive line holds strong without drifting, and Sanders sees what he likes and delivers a strike to, of course, Luke Floria again. You have to convert those 3rd and longs in this league, and he did, on a night where the margin for error was already thin given who he had around him. There was another moment on what I believe was the 2nd drive of the game that deserves real attention, because it shows genuine command at the line of scrimmage. Sanders comes to the line, doesn't like what he sees, and actually changes the play entirely. When you change a call in the NFL, it better work, or your coaching staff is going to have real questions for you afterward. With the play clock winding down, calm and composed, he checks into a play built around a fake pitch, rolls around the edge, and delivers a strike to his tight end for a clean first down. I bring this up specifically because there's been outside criticism, including from national football media, suggesting Sanders struggles with exactly this kind of play. The fakes, the manipulation, the more nuanced parts of operating an offense. What he did here directly answers that critique. Real operational command, real trust in his own eyes at the line of scrimmage, and a checked-into play that actually worked. That specific critique about play fakes and ball handling deception is worth unpacking a little further, because it's exactly the kind of nuanced skill that separates a talented passer from a genuinely complete quarterback in this league. Anyone with a strong arm can stand in a clean pocket and deliver an accurate ball, selling a pitch that never happens, manipulating a linebacker's eyes just enough to open a throwing window that wouldn't otherwise exist. That's a different, harder skill entirely. It requires total command of your own mechanics, confidence in exactly how a defense is going to react to what your body language is selling them. Seeing Sanders check into that exact concept, under real-time pressure at the line no less, and execute it cleanly against a defense specifically coached to recognize post-snap deception, tells you this part of his game is further along than some outside evaluators have given him credit for. I also want to show you a play that got called back, because even though it didn't count, it revealed something real about his game. 3rd and 5, his running back in the backfield, straight drop back, and his left tackle got beaten badly on this rep, pushed straight back into Sanders' lap. He didn't drift out of the pocket to escape it either, which I'd actually like to see him do a little more in that exact moment, because he took a shot to the face from the rusher on this one. But instead of that contact rattling him, it seemed to activate something. He got loose and picked up a genuinely nice chunk of yardage on the scramble. Unfortunately, a holding penalty wiped it off the board, but the flash of athleticism was real. And it's worth remembering that trait exists in his game, even when the box score doesn't reflect it. Let's get to the actual numbers now, because they back up everything on tape. Sanders finished the first half 9 of 11 passing, with an 87.1 quarterback rating, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception, plus a 2-yard rush on top of that. Only 2 of his throws all half went incomplete, and one of those incompletions was actually the interception itself. I want to walk through that turnover specifically, because I don't think it reflects poorly on his process at all. On this rep, his eyes were in the right spot. The ball came out on time with pressure closing in on him, slightly behind schedule but still delivered accurately. It ended up popping straight up off his tight end's hands and getting picked off by Buffalo's safety. I've never fully understood how the ball pops up like that on certain deflections, but that's exactly what happened here. Nobody's really placing the blame on Sanders for this one. We're talking about a couple inches of separation that, in a slightly different world, doesn't result in a turnover at all. If the ball had landed in a cleaner spot on his tight end's frame, this play probably looks completely different, and Sanders still would have made the same read and thrown the same football. Now, let me get into some of the broader notes from this performance, because I think there's a genuinely important theme running through all of it. Sanders looked like he reached another level of poise in this specific game. I've never thought he had real issues with composure or with how he carries himself in the pocket, but this was a step beyond even that. It felt like it simply didn't matter who was lined up in front of him. He worked the pocket with real command, stayed calm and confident throughout, stepped up into pressure instead of shrinking from it, and made small, precise adjustments with his feet all night long. The footwork specifically stood out to me watching this back. Clean, deliberate, nothing wasted. He worked through pressure without taking unnecessary sacks, and on multiple occasions, turned what should have been a negative play into positive yardage with his legs instead. There's one specific detail I want to highlight because it directly answers a criticism that's been following this quarterback around from Browns media circles for a while now. People have argued that part of why this offense struggles to separate its receivers comes down to cadence, that Sanders isn't varying it enough or using it as a weapon the way an accomplished starter should. He answered that criticism directly in this game. Not only did he draw Buffalo offside during joint practice earlier in the week, he brought that exact same skill into the actual preseason game and drew the Bills offside in 2 genuinely important moments. This is where you start talking about the layered, less obvious aspects of playing quarterback in this league. Sanders isn't just throwing accurate footballs and showing off his legs. He's operating this entire offense at a level that goes beyond individual talent. That media criticism deserves a closer look too, because it's exactly the kind of narrative that tends to calcify around a young quarterback before there's actually enough evidence either way. Cadence manipulation isn't glamorous. It doesn't show up as a highlight. It doesn't get its own line on a stat sheet, and casual viewers rarely notice it happening in real time. But it's one of the clearest signals of a quarterback who's truly comfortable running an offense. Someone who trusts his command over the huddle and the line enough to actually vary his rhythm and bait a defense into a mistake. Watching that specific critique get dismantled on tape twice in a real preseason game with actual defensive starters lined up across from him should put that entire storyline to rest for anyone who's been following it closely. One of those Cadence wins came in a field position situation, and I think it's worth walking through because it shows real situational awareness. Backed up deep in his own territory with poor field position, Sanders understood the assignment wasn't necessarily to force a touchdown out of that spot. Sometimes, in this league, you're simply playing the field position game, especially backed up near your own end zone. Give your punter room to work, keep your own defense out of a short field, and live to fight another possession. He drew a neutral zone infraction on a long down and distance. In that exact situation, picked up the extra cushion, and moved the sticks. The drive eventually stalled out. But the underlying process, understanding exactly what the situation called for and executing it, was exactly right. There was a similar veteran-level rep later in the game, on what I believe was a long third down, where he got the defense to jump again for a fresh set of free yards, turning a difficult conversion into a genuinely manageable one before delivering a tight, accurate throw to Isaiah Bond. Worth noting, Bond is currently in concussion protocol, and I'm hoping for a full recovery and a clean bill of health heading into the regular season opener. I do want to be honest about the 2-minute drill, because I don't think it fairly represented what Sanders is actually capable of in that exact situation. The play calling in that specific sequence was genuinely rough. It opened with a screen that lost about 6 yards, immediately putting the offense in an even deeper hole with the clock already working against them. From there, it went to a draw play. So, through the first 2 calls of that drive, Sanders never even got the chance to throw the football. His first real opportunity to pass ended in a holding penalty, and the whole sequence just fell apart before he ever got a fair shot to operate. I don't think that was some deliberate decision by the coaching staff to set him up to fail. There's always a plan behind how a coordinator wants a specific situation to unfold. And sometimes that plan simply doesn't survive first contact with what the defense actually does. Either way, it's a shame he didn't get a real runway to show what he can do in that exact scenario. Because everything else we saw from him tonight suggests he'd have handled it well. Add it all up. And this was an emphatic answer to pretty much every lingering question mark that's followed Sanders through this camp. I don't think he's ever had real issues with composure, and this performance only reinforced that. Whether or not this coaching staff ultimately hands him the starting job, what he showed tonight is a player who can operate an offense at a genuinely high level without much help around him. Behind a line that's mostly backups, throwing to receivers who are mostly fighting for roster spots themselves. That's the tape that gets you paid in this league eventually, whether that happens here in Cleveland or somewhere else entirely down the road. Real credit to that offensive line too, in pass protection and in the run game both, for giving him the platform to actually operate. We'll see what the coaching staff ultimately decides, but based on what I watched tonight, Sanders gave them everything they could possibly ask for. There's a bigger picture worth zooming out to before I wrap this breakdown up. This entire evaluation happened under about as unfavorable a set of circumstances as you could script for a young quarterback trying to make a real case. A weather delay that threatened to swallow the entire opportunity whole. A supporting cast stripped almost entirely of starters. A 2-minute drill sabotaged by play calls that never gave him a fair shot to operate. And through every bit of that, he still delivered a performance clean enough to answer nearly every lingering question a coaching staff could reasonably ask. That's not the profile of a player who simply got lucky with matchups or benefited from a favorable script. That's the profile of a quarterback who's ready for whatever gets thrown at him, regardless of the circumstances surrounding him.